It's good to be back with you. This is a continuation of part 5 of Chakmah Choter. We'll call it 5B, if you will. I was pleased to note that we got fully 15 minutes of the last program before we lost our internet connection and things went south on us. And that was a really good transition point because we got to talk about the origins of the concept of a Choter and who had written about this Choter and what the role of the Choter is. So all of that was retained and came across well. So those who are listening might know we are a Starlink live caster, if you will. 100% of these programs are live cast. They are, there's no rehearsals, there is no editing. You get it exactly as it is spoken. There's not even any sound correction or editing as part of these programs. The second thing is that we do use Starlink. Our test we just conducted showed about 300 megabits down and 20 up, which is pretty standard for Starlink. We're using their Generation 3 antenna. And so it's a reasonably decent connection, particularly when you recognize that we are in the middle of the ocean when broadcasting to you. So anyway, we'll continue. We'll make additional periodic checks to make certain that the streaming is working properly. I had just read that the locus of judgment and the inclination, the inspiration, the thinkings of and disposition of Yada is cognizant of and concerned about and acknowledges the conscious capacity of his soul to deal with, to observe and respond to moria, which is bitterness and hostility, resentment and acrimony. And as I was sharing this with you, that I began with the nom de plume of Yada. That was how I wrote for the first 10 years of my relationship with YAHOWAH. I was an anonymous translator. Invented an entirely new way to translate in an amplified fashion with a style that is unlike anything that had been offered previously, where the Hebrew words are actually incorporated into the translation in their most genitive form so that they can all be pasted and set into search engines so that you can validate the authenticity of these translations. I wanted you to be able to develop a level of trust by being able to validate everything I was saying. And it also had a contrast between bold, which is the gist of YAHOWAH's message, and then a standard font that would be used to amplify it further within the parenthetical. So no one had ever attempted such a thing before, and 100% of the commentary that I was providing was based upon my translations of the Torah, the prophets, and the Psalms. And I was diligent in doing a couple of things that no one had done previously. One is I scrubbed all the words of their diacritical markings. So I was dealing with the letters that actually appeared in the Torah and the prophets and could look at every word that was written similarly, regardless of how the Masoretes in the 11th century CE went about putting in their diacritical markings. The second thing that I did is that I turned to the Dead Sea Scrolls, and every statement I correlated to what the oldest testament of YAHOWAH's message revealed. And since the Masoretic text was the oldest manuscript we have of the Masoretic text, is dated to the 11th century, it would be the Codex Leningratus. You're going back to anywhere to 200 to 300 BCE with the Dead Sea Scrolls. So I'm pushing the timeline further back towards the original autograph of these texts by 1,400 years in many cases. And not only 1,400 years in terms of being closer to the actual transmission of the prophetic accounts, but beyond that, within 25 miles of Jerusalem, versus the Masoretic text was either scribed in Babylon, or it was along with the Babylonian Talmud, although that was probably more an Aramaic translation, or in Europe sometime just prior to the 11th century. But neither Europe nor Babylon are particularly close to Jerusalem, and well, the Dead Sea Scrolls were scribed just off the eastern edge of the Mount of Olives as you'd go down towards the Dead Sea. So as the crow flies, it would be less than 25 miles from where these events would have transpired, where the prophets themselves would have written. Wookie is looking for a way, I think, down from his perch, but Asher is sitting at my feet, and Wookie doesn't want to jump on Asher. If you're noticing that there is something missing now, that I had this beautiful flowered glass of watermelon juice during that brief time we were checking to see how much of the previous show was maintained. Wookie has he has a fixation. He has a number of weird proclivities, and one of his fixes is he loves watermelon juice. So Wookie took care of that for us. This after mentioning Yahowah and Yada, and so I understand that Yada is a verb. It's not presented as a proper noun and therefore as a name, but that makes it even better, I think, much richer, because it is an actionable concept, and knowing is actionable. It takes the investment of time. It takes a great desire. It takes energy. It takes discipline. In my case, it takes 24 years from sunrise to sunset and beyond, 14 hours a day, 6 and 7 days a week, for all of that time, for over a score of years, to Yada. So I have been about the process of Yada from the very beginning, and I like the fact that it is an actionable name, if you will. The next word is something that I was sharing when we lost our connection, and that is that in all of this time, I may be the only person to have rendered nefesh as I do. I think now Wookie is looking for the other thing that he has. I threw it under the Wookie wagon, so that's not going to help Leah. Wookie loves yaks. A yak is the bone comprised of a butterish kind of milk. Mixed with wine. Lime, according to Leah, that dogs rather like, and Wookie is addicted to them. Wookie has a lot of quirks, so that he may be an internet sensation, but Wookie has his issues. His favorite, I must tell you, is that Wookie every morning has cappuccino with Leia and myself, and he is a cappuccino fiend. Now, I understand that's not appropriate for dogs, but I'm not sure Wookie is a dog, so there you go. Nefesh is an interesting word. The religious have this notion that humans are unique in that they have souls and nobody else does, but that's not true at all. A human is an animal like all other animals, and that we have a nefesh soul, and so do they. A nefesh soul is the thing that distinguishes plants from animals, because the nefesh soul does exactly as I rendered nefesh here. It gives us the conscious capacity to be observant and to respond. With a nefesh soul, we can do what plants cannot do. We can observe our environment and respond to it. And so a soul is essentially our consciousness, our ability to do those kinds of things. And we're also given, as humans, the one thing that differentiates us is a nasalma. It's just that something that is wholly unused today, so we don't speak of it very often. But a nasalma is a conscience, which is the ability to discern between right and wrong, good and bad, productive and counterproductive. So when it comes to nefesh, I think I am the first person to provide this kind of a full explanation of the term, so that it can be understood as it relates to all animals, and so that we understand what capacity it provides to us, which is this conscious ability to be observant and responsive. And the nephesh as well is the only part of us that really matters going forward, because our physical bodies will be discarded. They have no value. In fact, they're a huge hindrance going forward. It's one of the things that makes Christianity and its resurrection so stupid. And of course, Islam with their bodies that are tantalized and or burned in the hereafter makes Allah a nincompoop. You're just not going to go beyond this planet with a physical body. Sorry, Elon, but you're not sending men to Mars. We're just not equipped for that sort of thing. If you're going to travel throughout the universe, we need to shed our physical bodies and just become an energy-based being. And the part of that energy-based being that is us is our nephesh soul. It's the repository of our personality, our aptitudes, our attitudes. It's what makes us unique, as well as what causes us to have ambition and being perceptive. Now, the thing that this says that Yada is able to perceive and respond to is the worst of Yisrael. It's Moriah. Now, this is not the same word that is used when describing the mountain that YAHOWAH values so much, the mountain of his Temple Mount, the top of the ridgeline of Zion, which is Mount Moriah. Moriah will have a Y in it and also or W in it and also a Y. So there's two letters that are added to Mount Moriah that are not in Morah. Morah is an entirely different word. Three letters comprise it, but there's two more that are left out that are added to what we call Moriah, but Moriah. And here Morah is the thing that distinguishes humankind specifically or generally, and Jews specifically from YAHOWAH's perspective. From the very beginning, going back with Abraham and then Yishak, Jacob, Esau, the children of Israel, particularly through the entirety of the Exodus. When the children of Israel came into the promised land, it would be true forever for the northern kingdom, the kingdom of Israel, and was mostly true for the southern kingdom, the kingdom of Yehuda. And it remains true today. Jews are bitter when it comes to acknowledging YAHOWAH. They will not say his name. They have every excuse under the sun. They are hostile to God's prophetic testimony, since it is so hostile to the religion that they cling to. They resent God to the point that they will not even follow his instructions, preferring their own. There is great acrimony between YAHOWAH and his people. And it is the reason that there is a Choter. If this were not true, there would be no Choter. There'd be no reason to have someone that is responsible for communicating to God's people and to awakening them at this time, to reintroducing them to YAHOWAH's name and reacquainting them with their Messiah and the Son of God, Dode, if it were not for the fact that Jews are largely still insubordinate and recalcitrant when it comes to YAHOWAH. I wish it were not true. My job is to make it less so. And we're going to continue to pound away at the truth such that it eventually gets past that thick skull of so many Jews. It is something, again, that is unique to my writings. Jews don't much like to acknowledge the truth when it comes to the Exodus, that they were miserable little brats from beginning to end. And they didn't even get out of the Sinai before they were complaining and say they wanted to go back, even before Moshe parted the sea. It was got to the other side, and the first thing they did is they built a golden calf, which was reminiscent of the idols of Egypt where they had left. They brought the religion with them. They had multiple meltdowns. Two of them involved Morah. The first of those is when a woman named Miriam, which is based on this same word, she and Aaron came to Moshe, disparaged his wife, and while his wife had nothing to do with his authority, they still started at him from that angle, saying that he is disqualified because his wife was beneath them from their point of view, and then said that they too speak for God. Her name was Miriam. It means contentious, embittered, rebellious, defiant, and insubordinate. When Yahweh heard of this, he didn't even bother to mention the insubordination issue, which should be the issue of demeaning Moshe's wife, because he knew that was just a tactic that they were using to disparage Moshe's character and to justify their intervention. And more to the fact that it was only part of the story because it's prophetic of what I would endure when I had a very rebellious, defiant, hostile, acrimonious woman make the same claims, disparage my wife ruthlessly. She went where Miriam just said, questioned Moshe's wife, this embittered, psychotic piece of trash. I mean, I just really despise her. Went into great lengths to write whole articles on how she was trying to not only besmirch my wife's character, but send her to hell. And for no other reason than she's just flat out jealous. And she needed some way to get at me so that she could claim that she too spoke for God. And of course, her approach to speaking for God is to corrupt his testimony and to wear me like a skin, because she's got no creativity, no insight, no Chakmah. And so all of this was actually presented in the Torah, specifically to address what I would have to endure. And you might say, well, that's making a big assumption that the Torah is the ultimate big deal, and who are you to claim that an episode in your life would justify a portion of the Torah being written that way? Well, the reason is that the Torah is a broad picture of God's people and of giving them a foundation of how they should act in Yahweh's presence, which the children of Israel largely ignored and still largely ignored to this day. And the job that Yada has been asked to do as the Choter is planet changing. It's life transforming. If we fail, planet Earth is destroyed. There is no homecoming of Yahweh. There's no kingdom of Dod. The prophecies go unfulfilled. There's no Shabuah harvest. There's no Teruah harvest. There's no sacrifice of the Adamah Parah. The adulterous woman isn't cleansed. There's no return to the Garden of Eden. None of it happens because of the fact that there are no Yehudim who are acknowledging Yahweh by name and accepting Dod as their Messiah and Savior, and living out the Moed Mikre as they were intended, accepting the terms and conditions of the covenant. They don't know any of this, and they're still wholly embittered and defiant against God. And so without this mission that Yahweh has assigned to Yada, the Choter, everything is for naught. It's as big a deal as anything that's written in the Torah, prophets, and Psalms ever. And so, yes, it was written there for this purpose, because this embittered woman took the publisher, the webmaster, and the social media manager. All were part of the group that fled. And so with only less than a year and a half left to the Shavuot harvest to get all of this message communicated. That could have been a decisive blow, something that Yahweh could not have tolerated because he's all in on this. We succeed or the earth fails. The entire plan that of life comes crumbling down because God's people don't return. So that's why he made this a big deal. It's why Dode is bringing this up and saying that Yada has the capacity to observe and respond to Moria, knows how to deal with it. And the other part of this is that the story of Yisrael and Yahowah is the story of a fractured family of rebellion. And so it's essential for the Choter, for his empathy for God, for his emotional and intellectual appeal to God's people, to have experience and to know Moria, to have experienced what it's like to deal with a broken family, to have even a supportive group that were helping to communicate this message go AWOL. All part of it. And it's an essential part of it. And it's something that we have to overcome because God's people have to overcome it. And so it's stated here that I know how to overcome it. Now, I don't know how to overcome it because I'm super smart. I know how to overcome it because God told me how to overcome it. The story of Miriam's meltdown and her claiming that she also speaks for God is told in Numbers 12. And we have and we will return to that because it is essential for you to know exactly how God goes all in with an individual and that others can support that individual, but one person speaks for God. Now I'm it. The second is that during the worst episode in the history of Jews, it's called the meltdown of the waters of Meribah, and it's from the same word. Jews were at their absolute worst as it comes to their relationship with God. And so witnessing that, I have spent a lot of time trying to explain that to Israel, that this perception of them that they have been God's people from the beginning and that they are worshiping God and that Judaism is the mother of monotheistic religions. And I'm saying no. And, there even people will post online and say that one of the things about Israel, it has had a common faith for all of these thousands of years. And no, Judaism happens to be an evolving religion, and the most practiced form in Israel today was actually born in Ukraine in the late 1700s, early 1800s. But Judaism is the religion God hates most, followed by Christianity and Islam. He hates all three, but those are the three he hates most. And you might say, well, what about Hinduism? Well, God clearly hates the caste system, which was integral to Hinduism. And he's dismissive of anybody that worships a false god or many false gods. But the fact is that up to this point, Hindus have had very little interaction with Israel, at least in a negative way. And God focuses on those religions and political schemes, empires that abuse his people. And so he has a lot to say about Islam and Christianity and Judaism. And it's all bad. He views them all as hostile, resentful, acrimonious, and adversarial. It's one of the hardest things I have to do with Israel is I have to convince Israel to give up Judaism, to reject the rabbis who are their worst enemy, and to release all of the lies that they have been given, like that Passover is a 7-day holiday, that matzah is not a mikra that they need to pay any attention to, that Yom Kippur is a day of affliction, that Rosh Hashanah starts the high holy days, that the book of Esther and the book of Ezekiel are prophetic, and therefore that Purim is important, that there's going to be a different third temple. All of this stuff is rubbish, and I have to clear that from the minds of Jews for them to be in a position to embrace the truth. It is a really big job in terms of the complexity of it all. And then this prophetic statement from Dowd goes on to say that I'm largely alone. I'm never influenced by others. Now, that is absolutely true, and I am largely alone. I moved from a farm in Central Virginia, where I wrote much of this, to a home behind the hedgerow country of Montecito, and then from there to a peninsula in South Florida for a while, and then got on my boat and started cruising to find an island that would be ideal for 100% devotion to this, and ended up in the U.S. Virgin Islands. And so now I'm on an island surrounded by the sea where there are absolutely no distractions. And while we do have wonderful support now with a team that supports everything that we do as God has arranged and wants, this job is really largely alone. I translate by myself. I interpret these translations by myself. I'm not influenced by anyone. I don't read anybody else's books. I'm not doing what so many do, which you stand on top of those who have come before and you augment what maybe they have learned. I start right at the root words themselves. And so this is a very unique approach to Yahweh's Torah and prophets. And I do avoid all associations. You will not see me being endorsed by anyone, nor me endorsing anyone. God does not like the idea of associating with the political, with the religious, with the conspiratorial. It's one of the challenges in social media and getting the message out, is that I have to speak against really all forms of politics, militarism, patriotism, and of course religion and conspiracy. And those are the ways that people associate and identify themselves in social media. And you'll never see me making a vow or a pledge to anyone as well, nor do I accept them. And he says this is specifically true with those who are illegitimate and unauthorized. The only people who are legitimate and authorized to God are active covenant members. Those who have accepted the terms and conditions of the covenant, who have attended the Moed Mikre as they were intended, and that are actively involved in accomplishing God's will. So this was all mashal, word pictures, Proverbs 14:10. And should we be lured into the false impression that the heart, as it began, was credited for feelings rather than determination, Dowd is giving Yada's leb, which is actually his seat of judgment, more credit than I have done since the debate between head and heart. You know, I'm considerably more lopsided than was our king. Dowd was maybe slightly more heart than head, and I am overwhelmingly more head than heart. And I'm sure a balance is appropriate. I guess I just don't have time, and God doesn't have time right now for a whole lot of emotion. I've got lots of passion, but this is a job that takes place up here, and so I think it's important for a king to have a pretty good balance of head and heart, and Dowd does. But I think it's important for his herald to be as Yahweh chose in me, which is a person who is motivated by, guided by evidence and reason. Exceedingly judgmental, a very fast processor. I'm a quick study when it comes to making this an acknowledgement of what is true and what is not, and then of finding the common denominators in things so that I can predict the outcome and explain what the insights are that can be derived from it. There was something that transpired today that was an exemplary of this. The world is seeing little snippets here and there, and no one is putting the pieces together. So on both Facebooks and X, I made some connections today, which is that um, the Ukraine war is finally being set up to end. And it's set up to end because the terms have been negotiated. And the terms were negotiated between Putin to Trump. And it came that way. And this is because NATO and Europe and the United States don't have any cards left to play in this war. They started the war, and now they have no hand to play. The war has to end, and the only way to end it is on Russia's terms because of the long history of how the United States over the last 17 years, working with Europe and NATO, connived this war into existence. And now that they have formed their agreement as to how the war is going to end, Trump yesterday before the funeral of the Pope got one of the most interesting scenes I've ever seen in politics. Zelensky came in this big hollow room, and he was arm in arm with Macron of France. And they came to Trump, so Trump obviously solicited him. And Macron wanted to sit down and join them in this conversation, and Trump said, no, this is my conversation. I'll fill you in later. And Macron went away. Zelensky and Trump in this huge big room. There's got two chairs just looking right at each other, a couple feet apart. And you can see that Trump is telling Zelensky exactly what's going to transpire. And what he's telling him is the terms and conditions of this deal have been negotiated and you're going to accept them. This war is over. And within an hour or so of that, you get a release from Witkoff, who was in Moscow, that Putin has agreed to engage in negotiations without any pre-negotiated conditions. And there's zero possibility that's true. So when you read something that you know is not true, you're always saying, okay, why was it postured that way? And then immediately thereafter, you see Macron of France say that Ukraine is ready to engage in negotiations to end the war with no pre-negotiated terms. And that's never been the case. So we're also reading something there that we know not to be true. And so I'm uniquely capable of putting the pieces together. And what I recognized is that the Wall Street Journal is correct that Trump abandoning Ukraine to end the war on Russia's terms is political suicide. And that is because 90% of the people of this world that care about these kinds of things have been deliberately misled, and they're just, because of their politics, of their religion, or whatever it may be, they're unwilling to even see the truth. And part of that is because for the last 20 or 30 years maybe 40 years in the United States and in Europe, Russia has been positioned as the boogeyman. And even when Russia opted for representative government and eliminated communism and installed free enterprise, Russia was still presented as the boogeyman. And so it was easy to deal with that from that perspective. And then there's a whole host of leftovers from the Cold War. And even though we have absolute, irrefutable evidence that this war was started initially by George Bush, McCain, and Graham as senators, Newland from the State Department, Obama, the first term of Trump, and then by Biden, and that methodically over 17 years, they made this war inevitable and deliberately started it. And even though I've shared this and others have shared all of the evidence, again, which is irrefutable, that that's the case, most people believe otherwise. So it's political suicide to go against the perceptions of people, even when they're wrong. And it's impossible for a president of the United States to say, yeah, we're guilty. 2 million people died, our bad. $500 billion was squandered, our bad. We sanctioned Russia, and it created a mess for us in Iran with China and our own economy. My bad, but it's all our fault. There's no American politician that's got the character to do that. It's true, but they won't say it. So since Trump can't take credit for, well, not initially, he will eventually, for imposing this deal to end the war, and knows it has to be ended. I congratulate him on that. What he's doing is he's negotiated the entire terms. He's even told us that the deal's been negotiated, but then he's saying there's no deal that's negotiated at all, that they have no pre-negotiated conditions, and they're all going to just now work together and form their own deal, which Putin is not going to talk to anybody in Ukraine. It's just not going to happen. Nor is anybody in Ukraine going to talk to Putin. So it's all a pretense to say that, all right, they're going to create this charade that they've talked together and they've come to these terms. And when they come to terms that essentially is capitulation to Russia, Trump isn't slathered with, he forced this. And so it's a brilliant technical move, a tactical move by Trump. I didn't think he had it in him. I'm very impressed that he's pulled this off. Now, whether or not Macron continues to lay down and Starmer continues to lay down and van der Leyen lays down because they have been impediments to peace, I don't know. We'll see how that plays off. I'm not even sure that Trump knows for certain. But I can tell you that the terms and conditions to end the war have been negotiated. I can even tell you what the terms and conditions are that will be the end of that war. And it's a gift to be able to see how all these pieces relate together and how what's being said is not what's actually happening. And that's just an example of a modern current event. And of course, I haven't even shared with you the most important part of that is that if in fact the warmongers, NATO, UK, France, von der Leyen of the EU, and Zelensky, if they lay down and accept this deal and pretend that it's a deal that they negotiated on their own, then Trump is the most important person in the world at this moment. Then Trump is the ultimate peacemaker at this moment. But the ultimate prize still awaits. And as I shared in our program last night, that prize has already been negotiated. The two-state solution has already been negotiated with MBS and Saudi Arabia to impose on Israel to perpetuate the petrodollar status, just as it has been negotiated that the U.S. is going to supply them with $100 billion of weapons, and a guarantee that there is any conflict, the United States will fight on beside Saudi Arabia, not Israel. And to get that deal to occur, Israel has been sacrificed, and that announcement will be made public within the next 12 months. And it's already been acknowledged by Trump. So these are the kind of things that you're able to see if you're familiar with what the prophets have said, and you're gifted with a unique conscious ability to make these kinds of connections. So in this particular case, Dode is saying that I'm sufficiently judgmental to correctly evaluate and answer what is an onslaught of mora, antagonism and acrimony from so many, politically, religiously, conspiratorially, within the broader confines of a covenant family, and of course directly between Yahowah and his people, and between the religion of Islam and Jews, as well as today between progressives and Jews. There's so much mora in the world today that it exceeds unity and reconciliation and peace by hundreds to one. I am, therefore, more astute and accomplished in this particular niche than either Moshe or Dode, at least in this one area. I don't want to get carried away. On numerous occasions, they both buckled under the pressure of Morah, of embittered rebellions. And I bow my back. Every time there was a rebellion amongst the children of Israel, Moshe ran to the tent of the restoring witness and did a nose plant. He did every time. When Dode faced rebellion, I mean, he ran away from Shaul. I wouldn't have run away from him. I wouldn't have done a nose plant when the children of Israel came at me, and all embittered and whatnot. When Dode's son rebelled against him, I've had some experience with that too. Dode crumbled. He left town. And then he cried bitterly when his son was killed. So Moshe and Dode are not good at this. They would not actually fulfill the purpose of the Choter, which, I can say that the Choter is less important than those two men, but in the particular role that God has me slated in, I'm actually better equipped than either of those two to handle Morah. It's just something that when I see embittered rebellions, and I've seen so many in my life, I bow my back. I become more determined and more defiant than ever, as the mother goddess cult has found. And in this one arena, I am more confident and I'm more resolute than the prior Zeroah. But it being true in this case, the Messiah has called it to our attention, and it's worth noting. You need to know that if you want to spar with me, it's going to cost you. I'm not trying to win friends. I am not going to acquiesce to you. I'm going to come if you're challenging something that is important, like Yahweh's name, Dode's name, Dode being the Messiah, Dode fulfilling Pesach, Matzah, and Bakodim, the actual purpose of the 7 Moed Mikre, the conditions of the covenant, the purpose of the Torah, the timing of that the prophets have laid out for the fulfillment of these events going forward. You're not going to do well to spar with me. I'm not here as your debate partner. I'm here to tell you the truth. And if you don't want to accept the truth, then you're an obstacle. And again, I'm not here to chit chat with you about it. If you're an obstacle, I'm going to run right over you. We don't have any additional time left. We don't have any opportunity for a do-over here. We have our backs up against a wall. Now, this considered, Morah is the common denominator between Moshe and myself, and likely Dode as well. We have been assaulted by those displaying an overriding propensity to be Morah, resentful and acrimonious, rebellious and defiant. Learning how to respond is why the Torah shares, and we have read and we will continue to scrutinize the prophetic portrayals of Miriam's revolt against Moshe's authority to singularly speak for God. It is also why Yahweh shared the exceedingly embarrassing narratives pertaining to the meltdown at the waters of Moriah shortly thereafter. These things would not be in the Torah if it wasn't for us, because in fact, they're embarrassing to Yahweh. They're embarrassing to his people. And yet they equip us to overcome the obstacles that have been placed in our way as we try to reconcile this relationship with Israel. So, knowing that what had been would be, and that Yada would endure what Moshe experienced, Dode wanted his herald forewarned and prepared, equipped. And aware that his son had provided this warning in his ode to the Choter, it's little wonder why Yahowah was a bit put off by the fact that I asked him for advice on how to respond to this current rendition of Morah, of rebellion, when he had already provided the advice thrice over. I should have known. I've read it. I should have been aware. But, Yahowah realizes that he's working with flawed instruments, and his job is to equip us when we need help. So I should tell you that in my defense, I translated Mashal 14, this passage that we're studying now, many, many years ago, back when I was first hearing of the Choter, this rod of divine judgment and branch of life from Yashayah. And at the time, I had used the name Yada, the one who knows, but was unaware of Yahweh's call to be a Bashar, a human herald, a Nakar, an observant foreigner, an Ed, restoring witness, a Zeroah, one who cultivates the harvest, a Malak, spiritual messenger, a Kol, voice of God, and his pay, mouth, much less serving as a Eleph and Shor, a learned and observant bull, an Adamah Parah, bloody red man of the earth who is productive as a bovine, or Zehbo men Edom, the one coming out of Edom to save many. The Morah, embittered rebellion, was many years into my future then, and it's behind me now. And I was at the time unaware of my role pursuant to the Shabua Ketzir, the 7 Shabat harvest, and of the Teruah Lakat, and that herald's gleaning. Back then, I would not have known how to handle the subsequent revelation that I would be sacrificed as the bull to save the remaining mortal remnant of Yisrael prior to the Messiah's return. Nor was I aware that Chakmah would play such a pivotal role in the reenactment of what has taken place related to Morah. So yes, Dode foreshadowed these events. I was still in grade school when he was offering a postgraduate dissertation. Chakmah is the pursuit of understanding, something that, while it isn't gift wrapped, it is opened up and revealed over time. And speaking of gifts, I'm appreciative of Yahowah recording and sharing all of this with us. It is as if he is displaying empathy, saying that, well, he has endured similar, and he can relate. It's true. That is the most reasonable conclusion, because the attack on Moshe's wife in Numbers 12 and mine in Proverbs 14 played no part in either story. And yet, by including the introductory narratives, we're able to perceive the connection between them, the common denominator. And by scrutinizing both, we discover the proper response. There is a connection that brings us to this chance to know and understand. And so by communicating in this way, Yahowah is revealing that he takes great pleasure in teaching, and that he enjoys supporting his coworkers, and that we have the satisfaction that comes from discovery and learning. We even find that God isn't asking us to endure anything that he hasn't previously experienced and overcome. In the end, we prevail and they fail. Here we have it from the Messiah's mouth. The house of the revolting rebellion will be decimated and destroyed. The shining shelter and radiant household of those who are right will flourish and thrive. Here we have a whoop whoop from the lady of the house. This is Mashal Word Pictures 1411. So the assemblage, this household of those who have been engaged in the revolting rebellion, Russia, whether it be the one that came against me in the pursuit of our mission, or the bigger one, which is the revolting rebellion of Yisrael against Yahowah all these many years, he's saying that rebellion is going to be over. It will be decimated. There will be no one who is overtly political or religious, conspiratorial, or opposed to his people and his covenant going forward, from the largest institutions to the smallest of the antagonists. The shining shelter of the radiant household of those who are right will flourish and thrive. And this is a parak word. It's from the same as the Adamah parah, and it's a derivative of it. It says they will sprout and grow as you would expect of a choter. And it is, Oel is this radiant shelter and a brilliant shining home of those who are right, Yashar. And they're going to flourish and thrive. So God's quite clear in communicating through his Messiah how this is going to end up. And in this case, the victory is over more than those who unsuccessfully challenge the first and then the final Zeroah. The issue of right over wrong pertains more to overcoming Morah, insubordination, and acrimonious attitudes of the children of Israel during their meltdown at the waters of Meribah, the rebellious contention, than anything else. When Yom Teruah, the day of the herald, is fulfilled, the rebellion, well, it will be over. And only the Oel Yashar, the shining and radiant home of those who are right, will remain. And it will parash, grow, flourish, and thrive. The Choter, having been wielded as a rod of divine judgment, will bear fruit as a stem of life. And that this is a life lesson for all of us, our King surmised. There is the substantive and enriching way, which is straightforward and right, unto the appearance and presence of an individual man. But her outcome in the end is the path that leads to the realm of death. Mashal Word Pictures 14:12. When people go off and go rogue, they don't go rogue thinking that, well, they're destined to hell. Now, when Paul created the Christian New Testament, the first 14 letters, then inspired the books of Mark, Luke, and Acts, he wasn't thinking, well, you know what I'm doing is I'm getting naming rights for Sheol. People justify everything that they do. And this is true of this cult that tried to dismiss me and replace me. They came at it saying that, well, because there is a spirit mom and her voice needs to be heard, and spirit mom is proclaimed in the 8th proverb, and you haven't given due credit to spirit mom, many people are going to die unless we intervene and speak on behalf of spirit mom. Not a word of it was true, but nonetheless, it was their justification. And so they're in their mind, they've told each other that they're doing a really good thing. What could be bad about sharing the word of God, even if we are copying somebody else's translation, somebody else's style, using their name, using their transliterations, and then corrupting them for our purpose? What could be bad with that? What's wrong with a counterfeit bill? What's wrong with identity theft? There is always a way that people go about justifying what they're doing, and they make it appear that they're doing something worthwhile. I had one woman said, as a mother myself, it's just inspirational for me to look at the scriptures in a new light and approach them from a presence of my spiritual mother.
Oh.
Do you know why there's no mention of a spiritual mother anywhere in the Torah, prophets, and Psalms? There isn't one. You know why there's not a speaking role any place for the voice of Spirit Mom anywhere in the Torah, prophets, and Psalms? Because said Spirit Mom says nothing. You know why there's no mention of a Spirit Mom in the 8th Mashal that they quote? Because it doesn't mention Ruach, Spirit, or M, Mother, anywhere. Not a single word. But they justify what they do. It's the road that leads to death, if they're lucky. But God's on them. And the role of the Choter is to implement divine justice. So it picked a bad person to go against. The way to YAHOWAH is straightforward and it's narrow. His path is accommodating of those who follow his instructions, but exceedingly restrictive when you don't. The route home is substantially enriching, and it stands out to those who stand up and notice what God says. In this regard, Dode recognized that Yesh was the actionable root of his father's name, Yeshe, meaning to stand out, to be noticed as the substance of existence. He also realized that the Choter would be grafted into this stump and his rootstock by referencing Yeshe and what Yashayah would write 300 years later in his presentation of the Choter, tying these prophecies together in yet another way. This is a correlation that leads to our Chakmah comprehension. The insights that the Choter would derive from both Moshe and Dode, numerous insights, as well as from Yashayah, is that this is the way that YAHOWAH has communicated his 7 steps that comprise the route home, none of which can be ignored. They can't be misinterpreted. They can't be replaced without annulling the intent, misdirecting the wayfarer, or yielding catastrophic consequences. Dode enabled the promised benefits of the first 3, the spring Mikre and 33 CE, offering eternal life, the perfection of our soul, adoption into his father's family, along with the tenfold enrichment and empowerment. Then, by recognizing what our king had achieved, the Choter would cultivate the Shabuah harvest as well as the Teruah ingathering, facilitating the Messiah's return on the day of reconciliation through his sacrifice on the day of the herald, enabling our re-entry into Eden on Sukkah. That's God's story. And we're here to make certain it plays out that way. Therefore, God's son, Dode, is being remarkably Chakmah by alluding to Pesach, Matzah, and Bekurim, which he would fulfill, now has fulfilled, which facilitate the events for which this Choter is responsible, so that we can all celebrate forevermore as one big happy family. This is the way of those who are straightforward and right regarding the Pene, the appearance and presence of the Ish, individual man of whom the Messiah is addressing. However, there will be an entirely different Akareth he outcome for the adversarial woman in the end. Her derricks, Maweth, is the path to the realm of death. And as was the case previously, this woman's deadly way could be addressing Miriam's, her recent rebellious incarnation, or the adulterous woman of Israel who first went rogue at Meribah and now must be cleansed to meet her groom, the Melech Dod. Or it could represent all of these things and likely does. Yahweh loves it when truth is layered together and we have this opportunity to see our future in our past and to see how things that he has endured, we can endure, and as he did, overcome. So there are, of course, many ways that appear right, but they all lead to the same place. These include religion, politics, conspiracy, militancy, caste system, economics, anti-Semitism. And most damaging of these has become the grossly immoral fusion today of progressive politics and is the Islamic religion, the Red-Green Alliance. What they have in common is that they are all Morah and result in Maweth, millions, billions of Morah infused Maweths. A decade ago, when I first drew the connection between the presentation of the Choter in Mashal 14 and Yashaya 11, I had stopped translating the word picture at this point, but clearly Dode was nowhere near finished with his prophetic portrayal. And so we're going to continue. Also, in joyful laughter as well as mocking derision, he may be anguished and grieved, the judgmentally and emotionally. And her future in the end, jubilation and celebration, will be anguish and affliction. This is a tough one to translate smoothly into English, but he begins by saying that in joy and laughter, as well as in mocking derision, there can be tremendous anguish and grief. And this can happen in thought and in inclination and in judgment, and it can happen as a result of an overflowing amount of emotions. And it speaks then specifically of this evil woman, and it says, in the end, her future, her celebration and jubilation over her temporal successes, if there are any, will end in anguish and affliction. It does not end well for those who continue to be Morah. And they may laugh, they may think that they've found something that's just really wonderful. Oh, it's so nice to be able to speak for Spirit Mom and convey what she wants us to know as she loves all of her little children and makes them feel warm and fuzzy in the end. No. Going to be nothing but anguish and affliction because it's just flatly untrue. Because of his conduct through life, however, by contrast, he's going to be continually satisfied, Shabat. He will find contentment and overflowing abundance. Turning away, retreating and recoiling in judgment, disposition and determination, because concerning him is a proper and productive man. And I think we'll conclude this program on this statement where Dode wants us to know that there is a a consistency here. That the Choter is, if anything, loyal, determined, steadfast, uncompromising. And he's going to conduct his life along a path that is consistent and satisfying. It will overflow with an abundance of insights. And he will continually turn away from being judgmental of, being determined in his disposition to avoid any unsavory connections. And that is because, in the end, from Dod's perspective and from Yahowah's, even from Yashayah's, he is a productive individual, discerning and useful, particularly on behalf of Yahowah for the reconciliation of Yisrael. Mashal, word pictures, Proverbs 14:14. So I thank you so much for being part of this program. I apologize for the interruption we had at the 15-minute mark as we continued, but fortunately we caught it right away and were able to resume with part 5B of Chakmah Choter. Thank you so much for listening. Good day.